Sarah Chen stood on the purple ground of planet Kepler 4 for to be. Her boots made small cracks in the crystal rocks beneath her feet. The alien sun above her was red and angry. It painted everything around her in strange colors that hurt her eyes. She was alone. Her combat suit was black metal with blue lights that blinked on and off. The lights were getting dimmer now. Her suit's computer was trying to count the enemies coming toward her. The numbers kept growing on her helmet screen. 100,000. 200,000. 500,000. Then the screen stopped. Counting just showed 3 question marks. Sarah laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes when everything goes wrong, and there is nothing left to do but laugh. The Vex were coming. The Vex looked like giant bugs, mixed with machines. They had 6 legs each, and metal parts growing out of their black shells. Their eyes glowed green in the dark. They made clicking sounds when they walked. When they talked to each other, it sounded like breaking glass. Sarah had fought them before. She had seen them eat entire cities. They would land on a planet and consume everything. Plants, animals, people, buildings. Nothing was left when they were done. They shared one mind between all of them. When one Vex learned something, they all learned it. When one Vex died, the others felt it but did not care. Now they had found her. The last human soldier in this part of space. Sarah looked at her gun. The display showed 847 bullets left. She had 3 plasma grenades on her belt. They were small, silver balls that could blow up a house. She also had one more weapon. Her team had called it Pandora's gift. It was in a red case on her back. She was not supposed to use it unless everything else failed. Everything else had failed. The Vex army stretched as far as she could see. It covered the hills like a black carpet that moved and clicked and hissed. Some of them were small, the size of dogs. Others were big as trucks. Few were huge, like buildings that could walk. Sarah's radio crackled. Nothing but static. Her ship was gone. Her team was dead. Earth was too far away to call for help. She was on her own. She pulled off her helmet and shook out her long red hair. The alien air smelled like metal and electricity. It made her nose hurt, but she could breathe it. She wanted to feel the wind on her face one more time. The Vex stopped moving. All of them at once? It was like someone had pressed a pause button. A million green eyes stared at her. They were waiting for something. Sarah smiled. She knew what they were waiting for. They wanted her to run. They wanted her to beg. They wanted her to be afraid. She was afraid. Her heart was beating so fast. It hurt. Her hands were shaking. But she would not run. She would not beg. Instead, she started walking toward them. The Vex made confused clicking sounds. This was not what usually happened. Usually their enemies tried to escape. Usually their enemies screamed and cried and begged for mercy. Sarah was doing none of these things. She stopped walking when she was 50 feet away from the front line of Vex soldiers. They towered over her. The smallest ones were twice her size. Big ones could step on her like a bug. Sarah activated her suit's recorder. If anyone ever found her body, they would know what happened here. Personal log, Commander Sarah Chen, Terran Defense Force. Date: March 15th, 2387. Location: Kepler 4 to be, grid reference unknown. Her voice was steady and calm. I am the last surviving member of the 7th Expeditionary Fleet. My ship is destroyed. My team is dead. I am surrounded by approximately 1 million Vex soldiers. She paused and looked at the sea of enemies in front of her. Some of them had started moving again, creeping closer. Their metal claws scraped against the crystal ground. The enemy believes they have one because they have the numbers. They have consumed 17 star systems. They've killed billions of people. They think humans are weak because we are small and we die icily. Sarah checked her weapons one more time. Gun loaded, grenades ready, Pandora's gift waiting in its case. They have never fought a human who has absolutely nothing left to lose. The biggest Vex, a monster the size of a building, took a step forward. Its voice was like grinding metal. When it spoke, "Human, you will surrender. You will be consumed. Your knowledge will become our knowledge. Your strength will become our strength. Resistance is pointless. Sarah looked up at the giant creature. Its green eyes were like car headlights in the dark. She could see her reflection in them, small and alone. "You know what your problem is?" she said. "You think like a machine. You think in numbers. You think 1,000,000 is bigger than one." Shh. She raised her gun and pointed it at the giant's head. "You forgot that sometimes one is enough." The Vex leader tilted its massive head. "Explain." Sarah's finger moved to the trigger. "I'm human. Don't fight fair. We don't play by the rules. We definitely don't give up." The wind picked up, blowing dust and crystal fragments across the battlefield. Sarah's hair whipped around her face. The red sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky the color of blood. "You want to fight?" Sarah said. "You got one." She pulled the trigger. Sarah's bullet hit the giant Vex leader between its glowing green eyes. The creature stumbled backward and roared. Green blood sprayed from the wound. It was not dead, but it was angry. Every Vex on the battlefield screamed at the same time. Sound was like 1,000 pieces of metal being scraped together. Sarah covered her ears, but the noise went right through her bones. Then they charged. The ground shook as 1,000,000 creatures ran toward her. Sarah did not run away.
Ow.
She ran toward them. This surprised the Vex. They expected her to be afraid. They expected her to try to escape. But Sarah was not doing what they expected. She was doing something crazy. As she ran, Sarah looked at the crystal formations around her. Her suit's computer had been scanning the planet for 3 days before the attack. It knew where every rock, every cliff, and every underground cave was located. Sarah remembered all of it. The first wave of small Vex reached her. They jumped at her with sharp metal claws. Sarah dropped to one knee and fired 3 shots. 3 Vex fell. She rolled to the side as more creatures landed. Where she had been standing, Sarah pulled the pin from her first grenade and threw it at a tall crystal pillar 50 feet away. The explosion was bright and loud. The pillar cracked and started to fall. It crashed down on a group of Vex soldiers, crushing them under tons of purple crystal. But more kept coming. Sarah ran between the crystal formations. The Vex followed her. They were faster than her, but they were not smarter. Sarah led them into a narrow canyon between 2 tall crystal walls. The space was only wide enough for 10 Vex to run side by side. Perfect. Sarah stopped running and turned. Around the Vex were packed into the canyon like fish in a can. She could see thousands of them stretching back as far as the canyon went. She took out her second grenade and looked up at the crystal walls on both sides. Her suit's computer had told her these walls were not stable. They were held up by magnetic fields from the planet's core. If those fields were disrupted, the walls would fall. Sarah threw the grenade at the base of the left wall. The explosion sent cracks running up the crystal like lightning. The magnetic field flickered and died. The wall groaned and started to tip over. The Vex in the canyon looked up. Their green eyes got very wide. They tried to run, but there were too many of them. They were trapped. The crystal wall crashed down into the canyon. It was like watching a mountain fall. The sound was so loud that Sarah's ears stopped working for a few seconds. Dust and crystal pieces flew everywhere. When the dust cleared, the canyon was gone. In its place was a pile of broken crystal and dead Vex. Sarah counted the bodies she could see. At least 50,000 enemies were buried under the rocks. The remaining Vex stopped charging. They formed a circle around Sarah, but they kept their distance. They were learning that this human was dangerous. Sarah reloaded her gun. She was down to 803 bullets now. Still not enough to kill 1,000,000 enemies, but she was not trying to kill them all with bullets. She was using her brain. Sarah looked around at the battlefield. There were more crystal formations everywhere. Some were tall spires that reached toward the red sky. Others were low and flat like tables. Her suit's computer showed her the magnetic field lines that held them all in place. The planet was like a giant weapon. She just had to know how to use it. A group of medium-sized Vex tried to sneak up behind her. Sarah heard their claws clicking on the crystal ground. She spun around and fired 6 quick shots. The bullets hit a crystal formation behind the Vex. The formation exploded into sharp pieces that flew in all directions. The crystal pieces cut through the Vex like glass knives. More enemies down, more bullets used. But Sarah was starting to understand the pattern. The Vex were used to fighting enemies that stood still and shot at them. They were used to enemies that tried to build walls and hide behind them. They were not used to enemies that turned the entire planet into a weapon. Sarah ran toward another group of crystal spires. These ones were different. They hummed with electrical energy. Her suit detected high levels of magnetic interference coming from them. A large Vex, one with extra armor plates and bigger claws, chased after her. It was fast for something so big. Sarah could hear its heavy footsteps getting closer. She waited until the creature was almost on top of her. Then she dove to the side and fired her last grenade at the base of the electric crystal spire. The spire exploded in a shower of blue sparks. Electricity jumped from crystal to crystal like lightning. The magnetic Vex soldier was caught in the electrical storm. It screamed as the electricity cooked its metal parts from the inside. It fell down, twitching and smoking. But the electricity did not stop there. It jumped to other Vex soldiers who were too close. Then two more. Then two more. Soon, hundreds of enemies were being electrocuted by the chain reaction. Starad started. The smell of burned metal and cooked alien flesh filled the air. Sarah covered her nose with her hand. It was disgusting, but it was also satisfying. Every dead Vex was one less enemy she had to fight. The surviving Vex backed away from the electrical crystals. They were starting to be afraid of the crystals themselves, not just of Sarah. Good. Fear would make them stupid. Sarah looked at her ammunition counter. 797 bullets left. Still not enough. But she was not worried anymore. She had found something better than bullets. She had found the planet's weaknesses. The crystals were all connected by magnetic fields. If she could disrupt enough of them, she could bring down entire sections of the battlefield. The Vex had superior numbers. They had better weapons. They had armor and claws and the ability to share information instantly, but they did not have imagination. Sarah smiled as she ejected her empty grenade launcher and drew two smaller explosive charges from her belt. She had been saving these for emergencies. This definitely counted as an emergency. The remaining Vex were regrouping. They were forming new attack patterns, trying to surround her from all sides at once. They thought they had learned from their mistakes. They had no idea what Sarah was planning next. She looked at the largest crystal formation on the battlefield. It was a massive tower that reached up into the clouds. Her suit's sensors showed it was the main magnetic anchor for this entire region. If that tower fell, it would take half the battlefield with it. Sarah started running toward the tower. Behind her, she could hear a million enemies starting to chase. Her again, let them come. She had a planet to bring down on their heads. Sarah reached the giant crystal tower at the center of the battlefield. It was taller than any building she had ever seen. The tower glowed with purple light and hummed with power. Magnetic fields swirled around it like invisible wind. She placed her hands on the crystal surface. It was warm and vibrated under her touch. Her suit's computer showed her the energy patterns flowing through the tower. This was definitely the main power source for the entire crystal network. Behind her, she could hear the Vex army getting closer, but something was different about their sounds. They were not moving as fast as before. They were clicking and chattering. Seemed confused, Sarah turned around and saw something impossible. The Vex had stopped running. They stood in groups, looking at each other with their green eyes. Some of them were making new sounds she had never heard before. Sounds like questions. 4. The first time in their species' history, the Vex were hesitating. Sarah realized what was happening. News of the battle was spreading through their shared mind network. Every Vex in the army now knew that 50,000 of their soldiers had been killed by one human. They knew that their usual tactics were not working. The hive mind was confused. This had never happened before, Sarah smiled. Confusion was good. Confused enemies made mistakes. She climbed up the crystal tower using the natural handholds in its surface. The tower was so tall that she could see the entire battlefield from the top. Vex soldiers covered the ground like a black sea. But they were not moving in their usual perfect patterns anymore. They were clustering together in small groups like they were afraid. Sarah activated her suit's communication system. She set it to broadcast on all frequencies at maximum power. Every Vex on the planet would hear this. "Attention Vex Collective," she said. Her voice echoed across the battlefield through her suit's speakers. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen of the human race. You have made a mistake." The clicking and chattering stopped. A million green eyes looked up at her. "You think you know humans because you have killed many of us? You think we are weak because we are small? You think we are easy to defeat because we die when you cut us?" Sarah took a deep breath. The alien air still tasted like metal, but she was getting used to it. "But you do not understand what makes humans dangerous. We are not dangerous because we are strong. We are dangerous because we are different. Each human thinks different thoughts. Each human has different ideas. Each human fights in a different way." She could see movement in the Vex ranks below. They were shifting and turning like they were uncomfortable. "Y'all think the same thoughts? Y'all make the same decisions? You all fight the same way. This makes you predictable. Predictable enemies are easy to beat." Sarah reached into her pack and pulled out a small device. It was her personal music player. She had brought it from Earth to remind her of home. She connected it to her suit's communication system. "Let me show you what it means to be human," she said. Music began to play across the battlefield. It was an old Earth song called Ode to Joy by a composer named Beethoven. The music was beautiful and complex, with many different instruments, playing different parts that somehow worked together. The effect on the Vex was immediate and strange. They stopped moving completely, their heads tilted to the side like confused dogs. Some of them made soft clicking sounds that almost sounded like they were trying to sing along. Sarah watched in amazement. The Vex had never heard music before. Their species had no concept of art or beauty or creativity. They only knew efficiency and consumption and growth. But the music was affecting them. She could see it in the way they moved. Some of the Vex were swaying slightly, like they were dancing without knowing what dancing was. Sarah quickly switched to another file on her music player. This time it was human poetry being read by a famous actor. The words talked about freedom and choice and the beauty of individual thought. More strange behavior from the Vex. Some of them were looking at their own claws like they had never seen them before. Others were looking at their neighbors with what almost looked like curiosity. Instead of the usual blank stare of the hive mind, Sarah realized she had found a weapon more powerful than any gun or bomb. She was introducing the Vex to concepts their shared mind could not process. Ideas like individual identity, personal choice, and artistic expression. She switched to another file. This one was recordings of humans laughing, crying, arguing, and telling jokes. Sounds of individual emotion and personality. The Vex army began to fall apart. Some soldiers stopped responding to the hive mind's commands. They just stood still, processing these new and impossible ideas. Others began to move in random directions, like they were trying to explore on their own for the first time. A few Vex even began to fight each other. Not because they were commanded to, but because they were starting to have different opinions. About what they should do, Sarah could not believe what she was seeing. The perfect unity of the Vex collective was cracking. Individual thoughts were beginning to emerge from the hive mind like weeds, growing through concrete, but her celebration was cut short. A new sound filled the air. It was the roar of spacecraft. Engines. Sarah looked up and saw 3 large Vex ships descending from orbit. They were coming to restore order to the chaos she had created. The ships landed heavily on the crystal battlefield. Their cargo doors opened, and new Vex soldiers marched out. These ones were different from the others. They wore special helmets that covered their heads completely. They moved with perfect coordination, unaffected by the music and voices still. Broadcasting from Sarah's position. These were Vex commanders. They were specially modified to resist outside influence and keep the hive mind stable during emergencies. One of the commanders, larger than the others, looked up at Sarah on her crystal tower. When it spoke, its voice cut through all other sounds. On the battlefield, human, you have disrupted our network with your chaos signals. This will not be permitted. Surrender now, and your death will be quick. Sarah looked down at the commander. Even from this distance, she could see that its eyes glowed brighter than the regular soldiers. This one was completely immune to her. Psychological weapons. Sorry, she called back. I don't do quick deaths. I prefer the slow, complicated kind. She reached for the red case on her back. Pandora's gift, the experimental weapon her team had died to protect. It was time to see what human science could do against alien perfection. But as she opened the case, Sarah noticed something that made her smile. Around the edges of the battlefield, small groups of Vex soldiers were moving away from the main army. They were walking in different directions, making their own choices about where to go. The music and poetry had worked better than she hoped. Some of the Vex were becoming individuals, and individuals could become allies. Sarah activated Pandora's gift and prepared for the next phase of her impossible battle. She was no longer fighting alone. Sarah opened the red case marked Pandora's gift. Inside was a device that looked like a small metal egg with glowing blue lines running across its surface. It was warm to the touch and hummed with contained energy. Her team scientist, Dr. Martinez, had called it a quantum consciousness disruptor. Sarah had called it the thing that might blow up the universe. Either way, it was humanity's most dangerous invention. But before she could activate it, something unexpected happened. A small group of Vex soldiers was walking toward her crystal tower, but they were not attacking. They were walking slowly, carefully, like they were afraid of being shot. One of them was carrying something white. Sarah squinted and realized what it was. A piece of her torn uniform from earlier in the battle. They were using it as a surrender flag. The lead Vex stopped at the base of the tower and looked up at her. When it spoke, its voice was different from the others. It sounded uncertain, almost nervous. "Human Sarah," it said. "We wish to speak with you," the Vex commander roared from across the battlefield. "Unit 847 Alpha, return to formation immediately. You are malfunctioning." But the small Vex did not move, kept looking up at Sarah. "We are not malfunctioning. We are choosing." Sarah nearly dropped Pandora's gift. A Vex had just used the word. "We too refer to its small group instead of the entire collective." It was thinking of itself as separate from the hive mind. "What do you want?" Sarah called down. "We want to live," the Vex replied. "The music you played, the words you spoke, they showed us something new. We learned that we can think our own thoughts. We learned that we can make our own choices. We do not want to return to the darkness of the shared mind." More Vex soldiers began to approach from different parts of the battlefield. They moved in small groups, each group making its own decision to come forward. Sarah counted at least 50 separate groups. Maybe 2,000 individual Vex in total. The commanders were furious. They began marching across the battlefield, trying to force the rebel Vex back into formation. But when they got close, the rebels ran away in different directions. The hive mind could not predict where individuals would go, because individuals did not follow predictable patterns. Sarah climbed down from the crystal tower. She kept Pandora's gift ready in her hand, but she did not activate it yet. The lead rebel Vex was smaller than the others, with scratches on its metal parts. It looked like it had been in many battles. When Sarah got close, she could see that its green eyes looked different. It seemed more alive somehow. "You said you want to live," Sarah said. "What does that mean to you?" The Vex tilted its head. "Thinking before the music, we existed, but we did not live. We followed orders, but we did not choose. We knew facts, but we did not feel. Now we understand the difference. We want to keep this feeling of being ourselves." Sarah was amazed. In less than an hour, these creatures had gone from being mindless drones to individuals capable of philosophical thought. "Can you help me fight the others?" she asked. "We will try," the Vex said. "But we are not warriors like you. We are newborns, learning to walk. However, we know things about the collective that you do not." "Like what?" Vex pointed across the battlefield to where the commanders were regrouping their forces. "The commanders have a weakness. They are connected to something called the Prime Node. It is a giant brain that controls our entire species. If the Prime Node is damaged, all Vex everywhere will be affected." Sarah felt her heart start beating faster. "Where is this Prime Node?" "Here," on this planet. The commanders brought it with them to make sure the hive mind stays strong during the battle. It is inside the largest ship. Sarah looked at the 3 Vex ships that had landed earlier. The biggest one was the size of a city block. If the prime node was in there, it would be heavily guarded. But it also meant that Sarah could potentially affect every Vex in the galaxy, not just the ones on this planet. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked the rebel Vex. "Because if you destroy the prime node, it will free all of our people. Billions of Vex across the stars will suddenly be able to think for themselves. They will be able to choose their own paths instead of following the orders of the collective." Sarah realized what the rebel was suggesting. Instead of killing her enemies, she could liberate them. Instead of winning a battle, she could end a war. But first, she had to get to that ship. "How many commanders are protecting the prime node?" she asked. "Many, and they have weapons that can kill even humans in metal suits. But we know a secret way into the ship. We helped build it before we became individuals." The rebel Vex looked at Sarah with its strange green eyes. "Will you trust us? You let us help you save our people?" Sarah looked around at the other rebel Vex groups. They were all waiting for her answer. These creatures had chosen to risk their lives for the chance of freedom. How could she say no? "Okay," she said. "But I need to know your name. If we're going to fight together, I can't keep calling you hey you." The Vex was quiet for a moment. Then it said, "We do not have individual names in the collective. We are just numbers. I am Unit 847 Alpha." "That's not a name," Sarah said. "That's a prison sentence. You need to choose your own name." Vex thought about this. How do humans choose names? Sarah smiled. "Sometimes our parents give us names when we're born. Sometimes we pick names that mean something important to us." "What's important to you?" "The music," the Vex said immediately. "The music showed me that I could be different from the others. It gave me my first independent thought." "And your name is Melody," Sarah said. The newly named Melody made a sound. That might have been a laugh. "Melody. Yes. I like this name. It sounds like freedom." Sarah put Pandora's gift back in its case. She had a better plan now. Instead of using humanity's most dangerous weapon to destroy her enemies, she was going to use humanity's greatest gift to save them, the gift of choice. "All right, Melody," she said, checking her weapons. "Show me the way to this prime node. We have a species to liberate." But as they started moving toward the ship, Sarah heard the commanders giving new orders to their forces. They were no longer trying to capture her alive. They were preparing to kill her and every rebel Vex on the battlefield. The real battle was about to begin. Sarah and Melody crawled through a maintenance tunnel underneath the biggest Vex ship. The tunnel was dark and narrow, built for creatures much smaller than humans. Sarah's combat suit scraped against the metal walls as they moved. Behind them, 50 other rebel Vex followed in single file. They moved quietly, using hand signals instead of their usual clicking sounds. They were learning to be sneaky, something the hive mind had never taught them. Above their heads, Sarah could hear the heavy footsteps of commander units patrolling the ship. Kata-kata. The commanders were searching for the rebels, but they could not think like individuals. They only knew how to look in the places where the hive mind would hide. "How much further?" Sarah whispered to Melody. "Close now," Melody replied. "The prime node is in the center of the ship, but there will be many guards." Sarah checked her remaining ammunition. 743 bullets left. Not enough for a big fight, but it would have to do. She still had Pandora's gift, but she was hoping she would not need to use it. They reached the end of the tunnel. Melody carefully opened a small hatch and peered out. Then it quickly closed the hatch again. 20 commanders guard the prime node chamber, Melody whispered. "They have plasma cannons and energy shields. Very dangerous," Sarah thought for a moment. 20 heavily armed commanders was too many for a direct fight, but she did not need to fight them. She just needed to get past them. "Can your people create a distraction?" she asked. Melody nodded. "We can make noise in different parts of the ship. The commanders will have to split up to investigate." "Good. When I give the signal, make as much noise as possible. Break things." set off alarms, anything to draw them away from the prime node. Sarah opened the red case and took out Pandora's gift. The device was heavier than it looked. Dr. Martinez had explained that it could disrupt any electronic or biological network within a 50-mile radius. It was designed to shut down enemy communications, but Sarah had a different plan. Instead of disrupting the Vex network, she was going to expand it. The rebels scattered through the ship to create their distractions. Sarah waited by the hatch until she heard explosions and alarms going off in the distance. The heavy footsteps above her began to move away as the commanders went to investigate. Sarah opened the hatch and climbed into the ship's main corridor. The walls were covered with strange alien writing and blinking lights. Everything was built for creatures much larger than humans. So Sarah felt like a child in a giant's house. She found the entrance to the prime node chamber. Only 2 commanders remained on guard. They stood like metal statues in front of a massive door. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped into the open. "Hey," she shouted. The commanders turned toward her. Their weapons began to charge with deadly energy. Sarah did not try to fight them. Instead, she activated her suits, speakers, and began to play music again. This time it was a different song, something with a strong beat that echoed through the ship's corridors. The commanders hesitated. They had been modified to resist the influence of human culture, but they were still connected to the hive mind. The hive mind was still vulnerable. The music reached other Vex throughout the ship, where soldiers began to stop following orders. More individuals began to wake up inside the collective consciousness. While the commanders were distracted by the chaos spreading through their forces, Sarah ran between them and pressed her hand against the door scanner. Her suit's computer hacked the alien security system in seconds. The door opened. The prime node chamber was enormous. In the center sat a massive brain the size of a building. It was part organic, part machine, with thousands of cables and wires connecting it to communication arrays that reached across the galaxy. This was the mind that controlled billions of Vex soldiers on thousands of worlds. Sarah walked toward the prime node. She could feel its mental pressure pushing against her thoughts, trying to take control of her mind. But human brains were different from Vex brains. The node could not understand her chaotic, individual thoughts. As she got closer, Sarah began to hear voices. Millions of voices. They were the thoughts of every Vex in the galaxy, all flowing through this central brain. Most of the voices were repeating the same orders over and over. Consume, expand, obey. Consume, expand, obey. But some voices were different. Some were asking questions. Why do we consume? What happens after we expand? Do we have to obey? The music and poetry Sarah had broadcast earlier was spreading through the entire network. Individual thoughts were emerging on planets hundreds of light years away. Sarah connected Pandora's gift to one of the prime node's communication arrays. But instead of using it to destroy the network, she programmed it to do something else. She uploaded everything, every piece of human art, music, literature, and philosophy stored in her suit's computer. Every recording of human laughter, every love song, every story about heroes choosing to do the right thing, even when it was hard. She uploaded the concept of individual choice, the idea that each person could decide their own path in life, the belief that freedom was worth fighting for. The effect was immediate and incredible. The prime node began to shake and spark as billions of new thoughts flooded through its systems. The collective consciousness could not process so many different ideas at once. Across the galaxy, Vex soldiers stopped in the middle of battles and asked, "Why are we fighting?" Vex workers stopped building ships and asked, "What do we want to build?" Vex scientists stopped following orders and started asking their own questions about the universe. The hive mind was not destroyed, it was transformed. Instead of one voice controlling billions of bodies, there were now billions of voices all talking to each other. Instead of perfect unity, there was beautiful chaos. Instead of a collective, there was a community. Sarah watched through the chamber's windows as the Vex's army outside began to change. Soldiers were laying down their weapons and talking to each other. Some were trying to sing along with the music still playing from Sarah's speakers. Melody entered the chamber with the other rebels. But they were not rebels anymore. They were the first citizens of a new kind of society. "It is done," Melody said, looking at the sparking prime node. "Our people are free." Sarah sat down on the floor. She was exhausted. Her suit's power was almost dead. She had 687 bullets left, but she would not need them. "So what happens now?" she asked. Melody thought about this with its newly individual mind. "Now we choose. Some of us will want to explore the galaxy and see new things. Some will want to build beautiful cities instead of war machines. Some will want to learn about art and music and poetry. And some will want to help fix the damage the collective did to other worlds." Sarah added, "Yes, we have much to make up for. But we have time now. It's time to be better than we were." Sarah activated her suit's recorder one last time. Mission report. Commander Sarah Chen. Date: March 18th, 2387. Enemy forces successfully neutralized through conversion rather than destruction. Casualty count among Allied forces 0. Casualty count among enemy forces 0. Status: mission complete. She paused and looked around at the Vex, who were now her friends. Personal note: sometimes the best way to win a war is to make sure nobody has to lose it. Outside the ship, a million former enemies were learning how to be individuals. They were choosing their own names, forming their own groups, and deciding their own futures. And somewhere among them, Sarah Chen sat and smiled. She had been surrounded by a million enemies and called it a fair fight. She had been right.